Hey there, you're listening to the EmpowerTech Podcast with Iyari Cevallos. This podcast is where we discuss all things tech and explore the growing ways in how we can leverage technology to lead smart, sustainable and impactful lives. On this episode, we get to speak to Corrie Dark. Corrie is a tech translator, getting to the heart of the value that tech can bring and how not to lose the human interaction we need to protect as tech transforms the way we do things. Corrie's company, Integrity AI, helps business leaders make confident decisions about how to integrate modern technologies in the workplace, creating AI governance policies and compliance, education initiatives for technical and non-technical staff, as she ensures AI solutions are driven by customer and business needs. Hi, Corrie. It's so great to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks. You too.
Look, I'm going to get us started. You've described yourself as a tech translator before, so I'm really curious to start where you're at today in terms of what you do. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So text translator actually came from a colleague and now friend of mine who most of my career has been standing between often very confident IT managers who speak a language all of their own and the rest of the business that are nodding their heads thinking they're pretending to understand. So my job is often to work between them and say, when he says the Jingawalla will blah, 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 what he actually means is your customers can log in once he's finished this sprint of work. So she calls me tech translator because of that. And I found it's quite a useful term because it means I understand technology and I understand what's in and about it, but I'm also really good. And the thing I love doing more than anything is putting it into plain English so everyone can understand it. That means you get tech people able to do the tech stuff and business people able to do business stuff. So I've been doing it for, well, I'm not going to tell you how many years because that'll say how old I am. Seasoned. I'm well seasoned with salt and pepper and chili flakes probably. But now what I do, so I've been doing it with everything from websites through to mobile builds and things like that. But now what I focus on particularly is AI, because AI is one of those things that is accelerating at such a pace we really can't keep up with it. And it is so heavily full of jargon that people aren't really understanding it, but you're getting businesses that are either too cautious or scared to put it in place, or you get people that have their IT managers kind of leading the charge and putting things in place and no real understanding of, well, why and where. So what I do is I come in and rather than going, here's how you should build, I do what I call kind of taking it back a step and going, well, what are we trying to achieve as a business? What is of value to us? What are the risks and things we need to be aware of? What's of value to our customers? And where is it of value to put a human face versus a technology face, or have technology do things, and put that in plain English principle language so that then what that means is there is guidelines and a framework for both tech people to get on and build tech stuff and business people from the board table to the front line to understand exactly why and where it's being used.
Okay, brilliant. I imagine that those conversations can sometimes be a little bit unexpected for those types of teams in terms of where you head around taking a step back, because I do know that, we like to fix things and we like to get on with fixing things, and taking a step back can be a little bit of a challenge, right? So how you talked about the customer there. I'm just wondering, can you tell me, how those conversations around AI are kind of, and that human interaction are kind of playing into that discussion a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I think my favourite example is health insurance. So I've worked with a number of health insurers, and they have lots of different types of areas where customers interact with them. So they tend to split into three blocks. One really tactical kind of stuff like, how do I update my address? The second stuff is more technical, like, am I covered for this particular thing with my policy? And both of those kind of queries are things where we ask, well, are these things that a customer would be happy to have AI or technology speed up or do for them? And the answer is yes. But when there's a more sensitive issue, like, so for example, say I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, that is an example of where a customer will want to ring up and speak to a person, and that's probably never going to change.
Mm.
So what we do in terms of looking at the customer journey is going, well, where is it of value to have a human interaction versus where is it okay to have AI? And let's just be transparent around the whole thing. So it actually kind of enables your business to be able to go have humans as being a value proposition as much as AI is. And that's the kind of bespoke stuff too. Then you can not bespoke stuff. That's the kind of outline you can give to people that's really easy to understand, right? And really easy to express on the phone if you're in a call center. Easy for the board to have a strategic value, but also really easy for the tech team to go, right, okay, these are the circumstances where we'll use AI, and these are the ones we'll make sure that a human interface is really easy for a customer to connect to.
Yeah, brilliant. I really like what you said there about the human interaction, being as valuable as AI, and thinking about it from that angle, because I think some decisions become clearer, I imagine, in terms of where you spend the money on AI and how you protect the human interaction in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, when it comes to change manager, I know you know a lot about this, right? But technology change can be really frightening for people, particularly if they've been in a business for a long time, staff, So involving them in the decision and saying, look, this is not just saying as a mission statement, no disrespect to mission statements, but that humans have value, but actually saying, look, let's find areas in the customer journey where, where for a customer it has value that you found to be on the phone or to be interacting with a human, that actually puts that kind of line into practice in a way that people can see. And I think that's really, really important. AI and technologies have, great advantages they can give us, but one that, that fear comes from not understanding what it is, but also not understanding how it's used. And then you get, as I said before, you get people over here talking in really technical language, and people over here going, I just want this fixed. And until you get into talking, I just want it to be faster for me to enter in this data. Do you know what I mean? Until you get those two conversations together, and what are we trying to achieve? What's going to help you in the business to make work easier? What value do you think we really can add as humans in this particular place? And everyone can kind of get on board with that, I think.
Yeah, and I imagine then also, if you're starting to value that human interaction more, you can kind of then, it makes it easier to say, okay, well, for me to do that better, how can I use technology to speed some things up, to make them easier for me to search for things potentially while I'm having that interaction, or spend more time in that space as opposed to doing the laborious tasks that I can typically do, I imagine.
Absolutely. And that health insurance example is a really good one in terms of humans and time, because when I wrote their 5-year strategy for technical implementation, and what they had been doing in the call center was measuring productivity by how many calls they took. And what we realized by going through the data and analyzing what kind of calls came in is actually what you want is fewer calls that have more time, because those, so we could free you up from having to deal with updating addresses and things like that, which, technology can do quite simply. It means we want you to be able to spend 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever it takes on the phone with someone whose loved one or themselves have just got a really sensitive, issue that's been, so it's actually kind of, I love that. I think it just gives a sense of what do we really want to do as humans in a business? How do we really want to interact, and how do we take advantage of AI instead of going, where else can we put it? Which sometimes feels like what we're doing,
Definitely. And I can, switching from how many calls are you getting as a success measure versus, having more calls that are longer and achieving more customer satisfaction, that would be a huge change for a team.
Yeah. And also gives them, it actually took the team and the team leader particularly, but it took them from being worried and stressed about how many calls and trying to get people off the phone and all of this kind of stuff, to going, oh, actually, here's a value we didn't even really think about that we have, It kind of puts them in a very different light from being, the call center, to here's our front line with our customers.
Yes.
So we're able to really show the value of this health insurance company above other ones, for example, because we care about you.
Yes,
you know?
They're being present and they're not as stressed and they're not trying to get off the ball, I guess. Yeah, very different.
Yeah.
And in terms of that human input, have you seen, how organisations are tapping into what customers think is the value? So I imagine some of that might be a bit grey.
That's a really good question. And I think the first, because usually the conversation will start with, there's often requests come into IT with whether it's the MD, and I can think of particular examples, whereas a managing director from a call centre saying, I want to have this particular piece of technology put in. So usually the first conversation is, how do we start by what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Like, we sounds so silly, but, if I'm a dry cleaner, if I could just find something that would help me iron the clothes, then, things wouldn't have wrinkles in it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of the problem statement that you want to get back to. Do you know what I mean? And I think trying to tackle what is of value is, if we're not sure, usually your frontline staff know. Like, normally the people who talk to customers are the ones that can see where the pain points are. Yeah. The further away you get from that up to the board table, as much as you try and keep in touch with it, the further away you are from that noise in that conversation, because you're relying on the data of what comes through in terms of, for example, what's being sold instead of what's being asked for that you don't have on the shelf, as a small retail example, right? So always ask the frontline. And the people who interact with customers. And the other thing I say often is, if people don't know, that's great. That's a great opportunity to go, well, let's ask. Do you know what I mean? Like, people, as we know, let's look at social media, people love giving their opinion, So, and if you're asking them things that, aren't a promotion, you're saying, look, we just really want to know what you think. Where are things that we could do better? Where are things that you'd really like to be talking to a person rather than what are things you'd like to be faster? You know what I mean? And just see where the buckets are, where things land that are similar. That makes sense. It's probably a better way of phrasing that. But and then you can tackle those. So that, look, as I said, I really want to speak to a human when I get stuck. I really don't want to keep, after I've asked a chatbot 3 times, please just send me to a person.
Someone.
Send me to a person.
Tell me what I need to do. How many keys do I need to put?
Yeah. How many keys do I need to put? Yeah. And sometimes, like, I've found 2 customer feedbacks when, just tell me, because sometimes, and this is going to get more and more of a challenge, I think, is being able to differentiate when you're talking to a bot and when you're not. And I think, our need for transparency in terms of whether we are or not is going to change over time.
Yeah.
But in terms of generational and being used to it and that kind of stuff. But just being transparent is often the thing that customers ask for. It's like, just, am I speaking to a person or am I speaking to a bot? Like, you're talking to someone, I still say thank you to Alexa. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. But yeah, just stuff like that. It's like, where are the pain points? And often, as I said, your frontline will know. And if you're not sure, that's an opportunity. That's not a worry. That's like, wow, cool. We can actually do something about that. Really simple. Yeah, go find out. Yeah.
Okay. And in the last little while, Corrie, I want to understand, you've mentioned that AI is moving fast. What are the things that you see customers taking advantage of right now? You've mentioned bots. Are those typically the things that are quite easy for an organisation to put in place, or are they still? Because I remember when they were really, the paperclip.
Oh, I don't know you were going to bring up the paperclip, and then they turned it into a cat to try and make it more friendly. Do you know? Oh, yeah, yeah. I think. So I remember it was. Oh gosh, I don't want to think about how many years ago. It was only less than a decade ago. Absolutely, you're putting in a chatbot, and it was an absolutely laborious process.
Yes.
To try and put something in that would, you had to manually feed in so much data to get it to answer questions correctly and things like that. That's a lot more sophisticated now. So tapping off some of those kind of tactical, simple questions that, how do I update stuff, like kind of frequently asked question stuff, if you like. You can use AI to do that, and then there's considerations on top of that, which is where the kind of business values come in, as well as the customer. I think about business values and also risk and things like that. So, is it okay for that information to go external, like you answering a question, or do you need to keep it in house? But yeah, that's probably the most obvious one. I think though, I mean, there's just, gosh, the more I'll come up with an example today and tomorrow it'll be out of date. So that's why I think it's so important and useful to go back to what are what are the challenges we're facing? What would we like to be better? What would we like to be easier? How do we make our customers feel like we're amazing? And then you can, then leave your IT team to come up with stuff that is fit for purpose to solve that problem. Because I think last time we chatted, I said this to you, but I think we have this complete misconception that for some reason we all think we should understand the depths of technology, but it's actually it's a skill, it's a data set of code. I have great respect for coders. I have no patience for that kind of stuff, right? But it's really complex, and it's a whole industry in of itself. We don't expect to understand law, and as a friend of mine said the other day, we don't expect to go into a pharmacy and mix up our own painkillers or our own drugs, right?
Wouldn't that be fun?
Wouldn't that be fun? That's what I thought. When she said it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's definitely not a good idea.
No.
But, because there's a science to it. There's and even just developing a website, that for, every different browser, you have to change something to make sure it appears correctly, right? So, but for some reason, I think partly because IT people can speak with a level of bravado that means people, and there's a whole other language to it as well. So they speak in this language with this bravado. There's this kind of almost expectation around them sometimes that people should understand. And then I think we have a real fear or reluctance to say when we don't. Plus, people who don't understand technology, we're concerned about asking questions and saying we don't understand. But also we have this kind of misconception because we use technology all the time. What we forget is that Windows has put a layer over the code and Instagram is just a layer over the code that's been done by those developers. I think it's a really tough conversation to get into in a business I've found over the years. If you go, and I think I said this earlier, because a technical person will be saying, oh, we need to use Jingawalla, the SharePoint, or the blah, 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 and everyone in the room's got these kind of wild eyes, like deer in the headlights stuff of, okay, but does that mean the customer will log in? You know what I mean? And so when you take it away for a little bit and you maybe hold up a picture of your customer, Jeff, and you say, well, what does Jeff want? And you go, well, Jeff would like to be able to log in and, pay his bill once rather than have to fill in a new form every time. You know what I mean? Then everyone can understand the parameters of what you're trying to solve.
It's really simple, right? You're making it really simple, and then you're allowing the technology team to address what you need. Because they'll know the environment that you've got, what sort of tech is available, what's going to suit this particular situation. I know that they also think about this phrase that, some people might be aware across and future-proofing. So they're ensuring that whatever they put in will be sustainable in the future, because we know that tech, can move quickly, and therefore some of the things that we used to use are no longer fit for purpose anymore. So they have all that knowledge, right? And I guess what I'm hearing you say is that whole translation between how the tech get it done and what the customer needs or what the business needs, you don't need to dive into the tech to be able to know what that solution ultimately needs to achieve.
Exactly, yeah. And we need to put it in a way that is not simple, but it's clear enough for everybody to understand and be off the same page, because then you can also hold each other accountable to it as well. So, the tech team can come away, and if the business say, well, you didn't build this like I expected, they said, well, we've achieved this goal for the customer that you asked us to do, and vice versa, So it just makes things really clear. And I think the other thing too, it's a great example about, the layers of future-proofing and things, and also tech debt, and that we've created what I often think of as kind of like Jenga towers of technology that are kind of swaying and, not really able to perform the tasks we want to. So it gives the tech team the ability to also go, as part of that conversation, well, look, yes, we want customers to be able to log in, for example. That's such an old school example. But anyway, log in.
We can all relate to that one. We can all
relate to that one, particularly not 2FA and remembering my password. And anyway, but, in order to be able to do that and have it happen within a couple of minutes, we're going to need to, fix all of this stuff as well. So, it's kind of, it's enabling people through that translation to talk to each other. Oh my God.
It's all about communication. It's one of the hardest things that we find, right? Especially when people are really different.
Yeah, people are really different, and it's a really different skill set. And we sometimes, people can have a bit of a shiny object syndrome as well and go, oh, I want an app. And it's like, well, does the customer need an app? Do you know what I mean? Like, I had head of a business who shall remain nameless years ago, who every Monday morning when I was working in agency land, almost without fail, he would ring me and say, Corrie, I went to this wine do at the yacht club on the weekend, and my friend's wife or so-and-so's wife was talking to me about Twitter. We should be on Twitter, and we should be. I'll be like, well, okay, let's think about your business, which is not, it was a manufacturing company. It's like, what is the purpose of being, like, what are we trying to achieve? But he, people get
excited.
Technology is really exciting, but so it's without holding you back. It's a kind of, or holding CEOs back from the tech team as well. Somebody's like, don't really want to build that. Why are we building it? Is it solving a customer problem? Is it answering a business need? Because if not, it's not a solution. It's kind of what solution needs is something before it. So it actually, I think, enables it. I love that you're laughing. That's great. It enables
manufacturing on Twitter. Oh, that would have gone down a treat.
And I've had to over the years find, polite ways of saying, what are we trying to achieve without kind of going, what would, I have been known to
feel bad.
You
don't want to dampen your enthusiasm.
Yeah, like that's a fantastic idea. Where do you think our customers are, though? Are they on X? Are they on Twitter?
Maybe.
Probably not. Maybe. No, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So who's going to do? And often for CEOs, it's things like, how much money and time are we willing to put behind? Because particularly when we're talking about the more marketing end, like there's an operational cost to content and keeping things
and keep
up,
it maintained,
and keep it maintained, right? So that would often be my ace card, like. So that's probably going to need a good 2 people, part-time to full-time a week. I'm thinking that's about this much money a year, and then you kind of dial it back into the finances. But yeah, that's a translation is enabling everyone to get to the table, right? And just kind of go, what are we here for? And then walk away with assurance that, as you said, technical teams can get on with what technical teams are good at, is building to a scope, building to something they know. Here's the parameters of what I'm trying to solve. Here's the risks I need to avoid. Those things. And the even from the board table, I said to the call center frontlines, being able to say, well, we're using it to their customers or to themselves. But our strategy is to make sure if you ever have a sensitive issue, for example, you're always going to be able to talk to a human.
Yeah.
That's easy. It's not easy, but it's it's easy to understand.
For those that are listening that are going, well, I need to keep an eye on my tech team. There's always going to be a layer of governance and oversight. But I would imagine that the technology team, if they have, a clear line of sight to what's trying to be achieved and ultimately, gain some value in the customer space, they're going to be quite happy about, aiming for that. In terms of a goal, right? It's not like they're going to be concerned about doing the brightest and thing that they can get off the shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it enables, in my mind, it enables conversation both ways. So I know technical teams that get highly frustrated with, most requests come in saying, I want ChatGPT and to solve my writing, to do my writing or something, and they're like, well, we can't have ChatGPT because, and they end up trying to understand the tech, and because, the data will end up outside the building, and you know what I mean? So it frees them up from all of that as well, so they can actually get on with solving the problem and saying, well, here's what we're trying to achieve. And of course, checking back in and things as well. Yeah. Right?
And Corrie, just what you've mentioned ChatGPT, and I've had a few guests that have talked about ChatGPT. How would you describe ChatGPT?
Oh gosh, ChatGPT to me is a little bit like a toddler in a library. So it will go for the brightest and most shiniest objects and the thing that's the most of. So basically, it's not a research assistant. That's the thing I think is most important to bear in mind about it. Like if you ask it to go, in fact, I said this to my brother yesterday when we were talking about it. I was like, if you go ask it to find examples of pink dotted frogs, it will go and find examples of pink dotted frogs, right? Like, so my view of it is it's a really useful tool that requires oversight and analysis. Use it to cut down your research time, but make sure that you're asking the not question. So what's not there? Do you know what I mean? It's only going to give you really one side of an argument, and it's going to find what you ask it to look for.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. That's what I would say.
A toddler in a library where there's bright colours. I hope.
Exactly. Anyone with a toddler can understand that one, right? Like, yeah. And the challenge with it is, I think that it's unlike a toddler, unless it's a very smart toddler. It puts the result to you in a way that sounds utterly compelling. So it's very easy to take it like it is your research assistant with a PhD and
sounds bright.
Yeah, it sounds bright, but it's not. It's not. It still requires deep analysis. I remember years and years ago, Professor Barry Ray, my first year of history, I remember him saying, the thing as future historians you need to understand is nothing ever happened. And he said, what I mean by that is that every version that you read of history or a fact or an occasion, it's someone's interpretation of that. And as your job as an historian is to go through and find as many interpretations as you can, as many sides of the story, and come up and form your own conclusion. I've never forgotten that. And to me, that's a lot of the separation between the kind of large language models or the ChatGPTs and the human oversight, is that you can come up with as many different ones as you want, but also then check, what am I not thinking about? You know, there's a great movie, well, maybe not great, there's a movie called White Man's Burden, which is years old now, but what it does is it's a very simple story in the US that talks about, a guy who's certainly quite poor and everything he's going through and the struggles of that. But what it does that's really fascinating is it flips race in the US. So everybody who has money, everybody on the billboards and the media, on the TV, are all African American. And everybody who's poor and seen as criminals and those sort of things are all white. And what it does is it's really visually jarring, of making you realize what's not just what's in front of you, but also what you're not seeing as well. And that for me is the example of why large language models are really useful, in terms of it'll only show you what it can see. And so our obligation as humans is to go, well, what's the absence here? Like, what's the flip that I'm not quite looking at?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. So, Corrie, I'm going to ask you a different sort of question. You know, you've been across lots of different industries. So I'm wondering if you can talk to, is there any industry in particular at the moment that is being really impacted by, this new tech that's coming through at the moment?
I think they all are in increments. I think the one I see at the moment that's been really challenges the creative sector. So the screen industry in particular, I think for a whole number of reasons, and that, one, ChatGPT, like we're just talking about, there's this ability to type in an idea and it will take all the examples of a particular, like, write me a detective novel, and it'll come look at all the examples of that around the internet that it's been given and come back with one for you, albeit very formulaic. But I think there's a challenge around our societies, if you like, or including myself, our value around content now. We kind of expect it to be everywhere, and we think it's easy, and we've forgotten, or we don't respect the amount of work that it takes to come up with an idea and to actually produce it with some rigor. So I read somewhere a little while ago, there's someone saying that, facts take work. Facts take work and effort and time. Nonsense takes nothing. I can sit here and say the moon is orange, and that took about a small iota of my brain. Was actually kind of researching into, well, what colour actually is the moon, and what kind of shades is that, and whereabouts, and why is it that way? That takes time and effort. So the screen industry in particular at the moment, I think, not only have the challenge of lots of its, of the ChatGPT, so the writing world, our lack of respect for content, the challenge of deep fakes and things being put out, so actors' rights and those kind of pieces. So all of that together, plus our complete, and I shouldn't laugh, but that we can't accept ads anymore. So where does the revenue come from? There's this expectation that content is cheap and easy. So the challenge they have, the screen industry has, is how do we find a way to showcase that human value of human-produced content? Where do humans sit within it? And I think our challenge as a society, particularly when it comes to more journalistic forms of content, is to go, what is the value of researched, fact-based content to us, and how do we And if it is of value, the first thing I think it is, how do we fund that?
Yeah.
Because we can't fund it through advertising anymore.
Yeah. And just for the younger folk on the call that don't necessarily remember the newspaper, for example, maybe they saw their parents read one. But, we used to have newspapers. Some of them still exist, but they were more prevalent, right? They'd be in the office, they'd be at the hotel room. You could pick one up at the corner. We used to have little corner stands with newspapers. And, I mean, I remember them being around the $2 to $3 mark max. I think at one point they were $1. And in the newspaper, you did have articles and you had current affairs, and political pieces and opinion pieces, but you also had ads, right? And that's how they funded being able to get the newspaper out.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the money comes from. And I think the thing is too is that what we're paying for is that research and energy and human intellectual effort to ensure things are as factually accurate an interpretation as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't get it. It's what, please don't get me down. You don't want to get me down a spin on news. But I think, we shifted very much in the Western society in the kind of late 80s towards a commercial, entertaining consumers rather than informing citizens. Or really almost more than that, actually showing advertisers that we had viewers rather than informing citizens. And so what that meant was, we had to get advertising dollars in order to have the newsroom make money. And that also meant what made good news a very different story, So it became being there first, having human voices, all of which is what, journalists stuff is made of now. When you watch the news, it's the next door neighbour of the place that's been broken into and not the expert. Whereas I would argue that, as a society, if we do need to be informed of things, we actually want to be, I'd rather hear about it a day later and have it be thought through and what are the consequences of that and where did it come from and what do we do about it? We've kind of really shifted to an infotainment, what was described once as fully a fish style journalism than we were before, but that's a massive conversation in terms of not just for the screen industry and broadcasting in general in terms of journalism, but also as a society, where do we want it to come from? I get most of my news on America through the Daily Show now, which is a comedy show. That seems ridiculous. And can you get, this is a rhetorical question, but can you get everything you need to understand about an issue in a 15-second Instagram role? You can't.
No.
So
no, and I imagine also, I'm just thinking through about how that's coming to us today and how it's being funded today, right? So if it's being funded by a particular organisation, are we getting a one-sided entertaining news segment? How is that different to before, where we had numerous outlets providing news? Are we starting to kind of come into a funnel that's quite small of what we're receiving as well, which doesn't give us that broader perspective? And how do people, and it's easy and bite-sized, right? So that you mentioned before, we do like things to be, we're starting to get very used to easy and bite-sized, and you don't get the full context of things if you are only consuming news in that way, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are, as I said, facts are hard, facts are complex, right? Like there's, even if you think about it from a relationship standpoint, things are always, there are two sides to every story, so it's like, and often politics is not as simple as a relationship, as complex as a relationship is. So it's like, how can you possibly expect to get, full context of something? And then I think what's critical for me about that is what's important about understanding it. I mean, I don't need to necessarily understand why a fire happened in a shop down the road, but I do need to understand what's happening in politics and how it's going to affect me in my daily life and my family and the people I care about, and what's going to happen. That's actually stuff we should understand and be involved in. Yeah. And I do think it's a bit of a myth when we say people wouldn't watch documentaries if we liked everything short form.
Well, if they're not entertaining.
It's true. We just need David Attenborough.
Yeah, across
everything.
or what's his name? Freeman. What's his name?
Oh, Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman. I mean, he has a beautiful voice.
He should. I'd like him on my NAB set. Like, at the moment I have an Irish guy who directs me everywhere.
Yeah. I'm happy for him to be my Siri, so long as he's getting some form of monetization out of that.
True. Yes. Yeah.
Great conversation around that. I think it's really important that we're aware of how these things are impacting, different sorts of organizations that affect us, And so just in terms of we're starting to get to the end of our chat today. And I mean, Corrie, I could speak to you about a number of things, but I'm trying to think of some things that will help people empower themselves. So, what are your top tips for listeners to empower themselves, whether it be in the organisation chat that we had earlier on, or whether it's around, being more savvy around how things are changing around us?
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me is don't be afraid to ask a question. Like if you've got a question, if someone, like I have a ban on acronyms. And you just like if you don't understand something, just say, because if you don't understand, someone else probably doesn't either, and it's okay not to. Technology is difficult and complex and has lots of things to it, and it's really important that you can explain it to you. Used to do things in advertising called the grandma test. It's like if your grandma can't understand this pitch that you're doing, you shouldn't don't put it together. So always just ask. There's no harm in asking, and you'll find that you're doing it for everybody. I think the second thing I say is never, if you're going to put something into the toddler that is ChatGPT, before you believe the answer, put and do another question that says, and tell me the opposite of that, or find me the opposite of that, so that you can then at least try and give yourself a balanced idea of, not just confirmation bias of your own thing. Those would be my top two, really. I think it's mostly about ask the question, make sure that you ask the opposite of what it is, and don't forget that humans are important, that actually it's not just about, yes, there was that robot the other day that led all the other robots out to go home, right? And that control test, and yes, it is coming, yes, it's here, but we still have choices as people, and that comes from, let's find, as I said, a language that we can get behind together and go, what are we trying to achieve? What's going to make my life easier at work, or what's going to make my life easier in society? And how do we then, make that happen between us?
Yeah. Look, I really love those top tips, nice and simple. I absolutely do love the one about acronyms. I'm constantly going, can you just tell me what that is?
Oh, crikey.
Are we talking about UPS, the courier company? Or?
And having just being newish to Australia, and coming from New Zealand, where you think everything's going to be the same, and it's completely different. I mean, become like, what is that? Anyway, yes, acronyms, and I'm not a fan.
Make it simple. If your grandma isn't going to understand it, think again.
So grandmas were harmed in the context of this interview.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, look, thanks for joining us, Corrie. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, you too.
See you next time.
Okay, see ya.
Thanks for listening today. Do keep in mind that this is a podcast for informational purposes, and all we're really doing is sharing our opinions on things that matter to us. With that being said, if you liked what you heard and want to continue supporting us, share this podcast with your network to help us grow and bring on even more guests. Until next time, this is Iyari from EmpowerTech, signing off.